everybody, and welcome to Fertility 101, our webinar for this evening. We at Therapie Fertility are thrilled to be bringing you this series of live events, and we really hope that you find it helpful. We're all really excited to be here. My name is Renee Van Meding. I'm part of the Therapie Fertility family, and I'm joined by our medical director, Dr. John Kennedy, and our resident andrologist, Claire O'Donovan. So for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to be talking all things fertility with a special kind of emphasis on something that's not talked a lot about, which is male reproductive health. So I'm going to let John introduce himself quickly.
Hello there. My name is Dr. John Kennedy. As Renee said, I'm the medical director of Therapie Fertility. My background is in obstetrics and gynecology. I qualified over 2 decades ago, which is demoralizing to even think about. I've been working purely in fertility since about 2012, and we've opened up here just a couple of months ago, actually. So it's going from strength to strength here. I think we're doing something really different, really disruptive in this space. And I think we're just looking to make fertility more accessible and achievable by a wider number of people. So I'm really excited to be here tonight. What I'm going to be talking about, maybe a little bit, keeping things a little bit simpler than we usually would. I'm going to be talking about what kind of things you should be doing if you're thinking about getting pregnant, and I'll be talking about testing. I'll be talking about male testing, because I'm going to throw that over to somebody who's far more knowledge in this area.
And that would be Claire. So I'll let Claire introduce herself, but I will say that this is her first ever webinar. And she's a little bit nervous.
Yes,
but she has no need to be.
Just ignore it.
But she's going to do great. So Claire, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so as Renee said, my name is Claire O'Donovan. I'm the andrologist here at Therapie Fertility. I started my studies in University College Dublin. I studied biomedical health and life sciences there. I then went on to do a master's in clinical embryology and assisted conception in the University of Dundee. So my research there was on sperm biology, primarily sperm motility. So we were trying to identify a compound that could be taken by a man or else added to a man's semen sample during assisted conception to try and make sperm swim better. And I've been with therapy since the start of the year.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to get started, and Claire has a short presentation to talk us through all about sperm. So we're going to do that, and I'm just going to remind you all that we do have a Q&A box. We have a chat. So any questions you have along the way, please do ask any questions. Nothing is silly to ask, and we'll get to those at the end of this. And also, just to reiterate, this is only our second live event. We're learning as we go. Any and all feedback is appreciated and welcome. And if we don't get to your question, we will do it. We do weekly Instagram lives and Q&As, so we will get to your questions. So bear with me for one moment, and I'm going to share our screen, and then I'll let you get things done.
Super. Okay, so I hope everyone can see the screen.
I hope everyone can see.
It's typical Zoom for us. So yeah, as Renee said, I'm going to talk about male subfertility today, and also male reproductive health. So historically, the burden of infertility has sort of rested firmly on the female's shoulder. And although this is inaccurate, it has really led to a sort of neglect in terms of male reproductive health. And so despite this, male subfertility is still really prevalent. 40 to 50% of infertility cases are due to male factor subfertility, and approximately 1 in 20 young men have sperm counts low enough to impair their fertility. So probably more alarming than this, there appears to be an emerging global crisis in terms of men's reproductive health. So there was a publication recently by Levine et al., and he suggested that an average man's sperm count has declined by more than 50% from 1973 to 2014. And this is obviously a really scary statistic, but we still need some more large-scale trials to kind of confirm this theory, but it really emphasizes the importance of being proactive in terms of your reproductive health and being really informed. So obviously this is really important for those trying to conceive, but it's also really important for those who aren't necessarily trying to conceive. So there is a growing body of evidence to suggest that male subfertility may be a sentinel marker for the overall health of a man. And this makes sense. We know there are lifestyle effects our health, and we know that our health affects sperm quality and production. And I'm going to mention a little bit later in the presentation some ways to improve your sperm quality via lifestyle changes. So at Therapy Fertility, we aim to provide accurate male reproductive health testing so you can make this informed decision about your fertility and your overall health. So we offer 2 tests for men here. We offer a semen analysis and a DNA fragmentation test, and I'm going to run through them in a little bit more detail now. So semen analysis at Therapy Fertility is based on the most current WHO guidelines. These were published in 2021, and there's a new revision every 10 years. So the latest manual had an increased number of subjects, and these spanned wider geographic variability as well. So we're a little bit more confident in these results than previous editions. So the WHO will tell us, what's abnormal and what's normal. And so the little table in front of you are the sort of main parameters, and below each of these values would be considered subfertile, and then above them or equal to them would be considered normal. So if you have a semen analysis at Therapy Fertility, this is the type of report you're going to get. So we conduct a macroscopic evaluation, and we also conduct a microscopic evaluation. And some of the main sort of most clinically relevant parameters of the microscopic evaluation would be concentration, motility, and morphology. And these terms are thrown around a lot, so I'm going to go through them in a little bit more detail now. So firstly, sperm concentration is the number of sperm per mil of ejaculate. According to the WHO, greater than or equal to 16 million per mil is considered normal. And if your semen sample is less than this, it's considered to be an oligozoospermic semen sample. Then sperm motility is divided into 3 categories. So the first category are progressively motile sperm, and these are sperm that are swimming sort of in a certain direction at pace, and that would be type A and B in the little figure there. Then the second category is non-progressive sperm, and these tend to just twitch on the spot. Our third category then are immotile sperm, and they don't move at all. So according to the WHO, a progressive motility of greater than or equal to 30% is considered normal, and a total motility of greater than or equal to 42% is considered normal. And if you have a little bit less than that, your semen sample is considered to be asthenozoospermic. Then sperm morphology. Morphology describes the shape of sperm. So the threshold for normality of morphology is an awful lot lower than some of the other parameters. So it's just 4%. So a completely normal man's semen analysis could just have 4% normal looking sperm. And that's because the grading criteria is really quite strict. So we grade our sperm based on their head, their midpiece, the tail, and any residual cytoplasm that might be left. So I have a little picture here of 4 sperm, and they look very similar, but actually only sperm number 1 is considered normal according to the WHO grading criteria. Now, obviously, not all sperm are that difficult to distinguish. In my next picture here, we see some really quite abnormal looking sperm with 2 heads or 2 tails. And in terms of morphology, 2 heads aren't necessarily better than 1. Right, so moving on to our second test, DNA fragmentation. So this isn't a routine test at Therapy Fertility. Your doctor will tend to advise you to go for DNA frag testing in certain circumstances. You might have had recurrent implantation failure, recurrent miscarriage, unexplained infertility, or maybe like increased paternal age. So DNA fragmentation sometimes can be a little bit confusing, but you must remember that all cells have DNA and all cells can have DNA damage, but most of these cells can actually repair this damage. Sperm, unfortunately, don't really have this machinery to do that, and that's where the issue lies, really. So some of the causes of DNA fragmentation, first of all, you can have a sort of production issue. So when it takes 64 to 72 days for sperm to actually be made, so it's really long and complex process, and they begin in sort of a round cell shape. By the end of maturation, they have a tail, they have an acrosome, they're quite elongated, and all of their cytoplasm is practically removed. So it's a really big transformation. But as part of that transformation, the DNA becomes really condensed and super coiled. And this is a mechanism to try and protect that DNA from, say, oxidative stress, because it doesn't have that mechanism to repair like other cells do. So ways to improve your semen analysis. Obviously, it can't work for everyone, but for the vast majority, lifestyle changes really do make a very big difference in terms of sperm quality and sperm production. So we'd always advise to have a healthy diet, try and maintain a healthy weight, limit alcohol.
Great. We're going to stop sharing the screen there. Well done.
Thank you.
You can breathe now. I know. I can leave, right? So I have some questions. I'm sure you have some questions.
So many. Okay. Why are sperm counts dropping?
It's the question of the moment, isn't it? First of all, you do have to remember that we have a really different sort of lifestyle than we would have had, a couple of decades ago.
Yeah.
We've increased recreational drug use, increased binge drinking, increased use of anabolic steroids. Our food is a lot more processed, a lot more pesticides used in our food. Then you have the whole concept of endocrine disruptors. So the theory is that in the very early stages of gestation, when mom is pregnant with a male baby, those very early, about 4th embryonic week, that what mom is exposed to can actually affect that future baby's fertility for its entire life. So it's full testicular function. And some of these disruptors would be really common chemicals that are in our soft plastics or shower curtains or tin cans or shampoos, like BPA, phthalates. It's all of that sort of thing. So it's really difficult to avoid them, but they do tend to pass out of our system in about 4 to 6 hours. So if we can reduce our intake, then maybe we potentially might have a better chance.
So from what I understand, my very basic knowledge on sperm is that, if you have a really poor semen analysis, that sometimes it is possible to boost that. Is that?
Yeah,
correct?
You have to remember that there can be huge variability from one analysis to the other. Like it really, 1,000 sperm are made every heartbeat. So it's really like a product of your own health. If you're unwell, if you have temperature, if you're on medication, if you're really stressed, all of these things actually affect sperm production. So it's not, body and sperm are one thing. You can't take one out of the other.
Yeah. And I think that's probably really important to remember, because I think like the emotional impact of having a poor semen analysis, I'm sure you see this all the time, and people come in
just to let you know, men place enormous disproportionate value on their semen analysis results. When you tell somebody their semen analysis is normal or God forbid high, that there's lots of sperm there, you give account of all this 80 million per mil there, there's invariably either an internal or external fist bump, and it's and that's funny, and we all have a giggle at that until you see the other side of the coin and you tell somebody their semen analysis is low, and there's a lot of internalized guilt and shame that comes with that. And in my experience, not everybody, but in my experience, what guys tend to do immediately, rather than dealing with that and processing why that might be the case, or should this be a wider social conversation, they drop straight into solution mode. Like just, okay, right, what do I do? And that then becomes, can I improve my semen analysis? Can I improve my sperm? And sometimes you can, or if I can't, what's my next step? What do I need to do to fix this? And you just avoid sort of dealing with those social aspects by dropping into solution mode. I think women are an awful lot more comfortable at this point in general talking about their fertility issues amongst their friends and their own social group. This is still a taboo subject amongst men. I think that's a huge problem. That's a huge issue, especially when you see the numbers that Claire has shown so starkly there, that half of all the couples that I will see are going to have some degree of male factor. and we just brush it on the carpet. We are in terms of conversationally, we're with male fertility, where we were with all fertility about 15 years ago. We've got about a decade and a half worth of catch up to play here as guys, and I think this is a good conversation to be having, and it's a good awareness to demonstrate. And I mean, look, undoubtedly in the future we're going to be doing more of these topics. We're going to be having whole webinars, I would think, devoted to just male sperm and male factor, because we could go all day on this. We really could. There's so much to unpack in this, but it's as important as female fertility. It's as relevant. It requires the same degree of care and attention that we would be shouting from the rooftops for women to get checked. Men should also get checked.
So something you said there, when you're creating an embryo, you obviously need an egg,
yeah,
you need sperm. Is the egg more important than the sperm? Because we were talking about this the other day.
I defer to Claire. I'll give you my stock answer, which is probably an oversimplified version. The blueprint, the DNA, if you will, for how to make an embryo is going to come equally from both parental chromosomes, both male and female. The engine of the early embryonic development, the battery, as it were, is going to be in the egg.
Yeah.
You know, the drivers of that kind. So we do think that certainly the first 3 days of growth are primarily egg driven, and then days 4 and 5, the sperm, and onwards, the sperm starts to come in. The more parts of the blueprint are being accessed and unpacked at that stage. You need both. Mm-hmm. We spend so much time, I'm going to be talking about it later, testing on female fertility, because we can't look at egg quality the same way we look at sperm quality. We can't see eggs. I mean, you could theoretically do an equivalent test on eggs for DNA fragmentation, but why would you ever do such a thing? It's a destructive process. You take all the time and effort to get these eggs out, and you go, yeah, it turns out they were actually pretty good. That's no use to you at that stage. So you tend to spend ages going through the woman's history, and then the man's like, yeah, how you doing? Well, let's do a semen analysis. And we're feeding into that bias by doing that. We should pay more attention. We should give more heed to these things. I think it's something fertility clinics and fertility clinicians are guilty of as well, because we have a really good toolbox to deal with sperm problems. Claire's very familiar with this. It's ICSI. It's injecting the sperm into the egg. I'm not going to get into ICSI tonight, but it forgives a multitude of sins. If a sperm sample is grossly abnormal and say only 3 million moving sperm in the whole sample, which we would consider very severely reduced in terms of count and movement, well, if you've got 10 eggs, you only need 10 moving sperm. Yeah. You get away with murder. It's easy. So that has quite incorrectly skewed our attention away from it. And if ICSI didn't exist, we probably would have spent an awful lot more time.
Completely. And even if you look at the publications in the last decade, anything related to sperm is a drop in the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody, since ICSI is fabulous, brilliant, but it really has led to a neglect of male reproductive health. It's just, and the research is not coming in really, because we just use ICSI. And it's kind of, I don't think it's the answer to everything. Yeah.
It's funny we had somebody on staff who was interested.
Okay, well, if anyone has questions on sperm analysis, please do pop them into the chat box or the Q&A, and we're going to come back to them a bit later on. So for now, you can
off the hook.
Unless we pop some questions. But John, maybe kind of we'll go back a bit and then maybe talk about some of the testing options.
Sure. So what we want to do this evening, I suppose, is I'm going to kind of be thinking of fertility 101 now. I've done these kind of talks before, and you kind of fall into the trap of skewing straight into treatment options and should you do IUI or IVF or ICSI or any of those things. I want to kind of take it back a step, and I want to sort of think about the steps that come almost before that. What should you be thinking in terms of what should I do? I'm thinking of starting a family. Is there preparation work I can do? What have I been told to do? How much money should I spend in the early stages? What testing should I do? When should I consider testing? So I kind of want to touch on those kind of things a little bit, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. I think that there's a lot of really solid, simple things that people can do. So if you're thinking about becoming pregnant, the first thing you should do is go on folic acid. All right, it's the one supplement that has been shown to be absolutely of benefit. Why is it useful, especially in Ireland? It reduces the chance of a neural tube defect. That's spina bifida. So that's really important because that's not something you want in a pregnancy or in a child. It can be, sometimes it can be very mild, but it can have very, very severe, potentially life-threatening consequences. So get on folic acid. Ideally, you should be on folic acid for 3 months before you conceive. That builds up the levels. Now, at least the last data I read suggests that 50% of conceptions in Ireland were, for want of a better word, accidental or unplanned. And so were these people now, they weren't on folic acid, so that problem. A lot of our cereals and our milks and other grains are fortified with folic acid. So there's a fair bit of it out there, but we recommend you get on it. It's a simple prenatal vitamin. I've yet to see a multivitamin which doesn't have at least 400 micrograms of folic acid. They all have them in it, so you're covered out there. If you have a history of epilepsy or something like that, then maybe you need a higher dose, 5 milligrams, but most of you out there, in fact, 99.9% of you don't need 5 milligrams of folic acid. 400 micrograms is absolutely fine. The other supplement you should consider is vitamin D. People in Ireland tend to be a little bit more vitamin D deficient for pretty obvious reasons related to our climate. And it's cheap and cheerful. The evidence isn't 100% clear that it's of use, but as I said, it is very cheap, it is very readily available, and it's not a bad vitamin to go on. After that, the question becomes, should you be on all the other multivitamins? And the probable answer, nobody really wants to hear this, is no. Claire touched on this in respect to sperm health. If you look at some of the publications, not strong evidence, but if you look at some of the publications around what supplements can do for sperm health, you would be amazed that anybody could ever have a low sperm count. The outrageous claims that are made to improve sperm counts and motility 300, 400% by just taking simple antioxidants. It's not really true. The sad reality is that multivitamins are 90% of the time taken by people who don't need them. They're taken by people who have already more or less optimized their diet and their lifestyle and their exercise and their sleep, and they have these things a bit worked out. That the least healthy of us are the ones who aren't taking multivitamins. Now, while multivitamins may be of more benefit in that cohort of people, that's definitely true, it's still a drop in the ocean compared to the improvements they could get if they fixed the other big aspects of your life. Their overweight or underweight or smoking or binge drinking or all these other things. These big obvious things are where the value is. So fix those, and then you probably don't need supplements. Don't fix those, and supplements might help, but you really need to fix the big things first. So what should you do to get your body ready for pregnancy or for testing or to be pregnant and have a child? Well, you should optimize your BMI. It's either bring it down or bring it up into the range. You should get exercise and look after your diet. If you smoke, you should definitely stop smoking. If you're binge drinking, you should definitely stop that. The World Health Organization defines a binge as anything more than 2 units in a session. Two pints in a session, and everybody does that. Yeah, but that's not really wrong. I don't know what to tell you. It is what it is. So in Ireland, it's not what we drink. It really isn't. If you actually break it down, most people don't go over their 14 units per week for a female, 21 for a male. It seems a little bit arbitrary to me. But anyway, it's that we devour our entire weekly allocation in a couple of hours on Friday or Saturday between 9 and 12. You know, it's not optimal. At that point, if you're feeling hungover the next day, you have, and I do mean this quite literally, poisoned yourself. It's like, no, you did. You introduced toxins into your body, and that will have a net knock-on effect on all aspects of your health, including your reproductive health. So small quantities and often, absolutely fine. You don't have to stop drinking caffeine. You don't have to never touch a drop of alcohol. You don't have to live like a hermit. You don't have to be completely clean and go totally organic and you start, washing salad leaves every day. You can be normal, just make smart choices. And I think if there's one clear message I could give you all this evening, if you are thinking of trying to, just do that. Don't get don't fall into the trap of going, I need to change every aspect of my life. Most conceptions, I'm not saying this is optimal, most conceptions in Ireland are somewhat pickled. And that's, for a better term. So that's the first thing. The second thing is what you have to do to try to get pregnant. And this is a little bit of a birds and the bees conversation, because you should have regular unprotected intercourse. And this is something we ask every couple who come into our clinic. One of the first questions they ask, even before they come in, is how long have you been trying to conceive? And it really is a very broad and nebulous question that can fragment off in a number of different directions. Because invariably people will say, we've been trying properly for X, and then X is 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or a year or something like that. And I've been hearing this for years. We've been trying properly for belief. And then if you explore that a little bit further, sometimes, a lot of the time, people will have been having unprotected intercourse for substantially longer, but they've been trying properly for whatever time they give you. What does trying properly mean? Well, it means different things for different people. For some people, it means we've just come off contraception and we want to be pregnant. For some people, it means I'm temperature tracking. For some people, it means I'm trying to work out when my ovulation is by ovulation prediction kits, looking for LH surges, looking for cervical mucus. I've set up a calendar. I've got smiley faces. I've got an app. There's a lot of them out there. It's giving me my fertile dates. It can mean a range of things. It can mean I've been on these supplements. I'm going for acupuncture. I'm going for reflexology. I'm trying to sort all of these things out. That's what properly means for them. So properly means something different for everybody. But one common and unfortunate thread I have found between all these people who say we have been trying properly for X time is that it's become a chore. That's what properly really means. We've stopped enjoying it. Sex for reproductive purposes is very little fun. I don't tell you that when you're starting, but it's true. And so that's for them what properly means. It means it's become a chore and we're putting pressure on an already pressurized situation. And that's something I'd urge you to try to step back from. The value of trying to predict when you're ovulating and having sex around that time is extraordinarily limited. And this is one of the big misconceptions that everybody has. And if it's come from The Simpsons or media or TV or movies, we all have a vision of what happens when fertilization occurs. And it's an egg sitting there like something from 2001, A Space Odyssey, and it's a cohort of sperm swimming up to it in a bomber jet formation, a little triangle, yeah? And they collide and you get fertilization. And that all happens in the middle of the tube. That's not what happens. Here's what happens. When you have regular unprotected intercourse and the tubes are open and the sperm is normal, the sperm will move up through the uterus and get deposited in the tubes. Deposited on the side of the tubes, building up little reservoirs of sperm dotted throughout the fallopian tubes. Those sperm will live in the tubes for 3 to 5 days, maybe even longer, actually. Some studies have shown that they've lived a lot longer than that. The egg is only going to live for 6 to 12 hours after ovulation, maybe a little longer, but about 12 hours. What happens is the egg is grabbed by the end of the tube and like a conveyor belt is moved up the side of the tube, not in the middle of the tube, up the side of the tube. And it is passed through those reservoirs of sperm. Don't collide. The sperm are given a chance, as the egg is passed through the reservoir of sperm, the sperm is given a chance to bind to the egg, and then fertilization can occur. And then an egg and sperm together form an embryo, which continues and develops as it continues its journey down the tube to enter into the uterus on about day 5 or so. Once you understand that, you will understand that if you are having regular unprotected intercourse, and if the sperm is normal, we know the tubes are open, which they are for most people, but then you are as likely to get pregnant just having regular intercourse as you are using ovulation prediction kits. They are not particularly reliable. They can be useful, they have a place, but ovulation prediction kits tend to cost a lot of money, they cost a lot of time and effort, and after a while, people just stop having sex. They just drive each other nuts. You start arguing about the laundry or something else. You displace. So please, hard advice to take, really important advice to be given, take a step back if you can. Try to get yourself out of that quagmire. Because this is the other thing. Your chances of getting pregnant any given month are not particularly high. best natural conception rates are 17%, or maybe 17 to 20%, if I'm being generous. The disappointment that people get when they get a period every month is much higher than that 17% should be. It does accumulate, and month on month it goes up, and you tend to have like 90% of couples conceive within 1 year, 95% within 2 years. But the disappointment, the shame, the anger, the anguish that comes with the period every month, or as another month gone, is really frustrating. And if you start pouring more effort into the space in terms of supplements, in terms of OPKs, ovulation prediction kits, in terms of cycle monitoring, it just adds to that without actually adding to your chance of success. Now, there's an exception to that. What if your cycle is irregular? If you've got a regular 28 or 26 to 32 or 33-day cycle, we call that normal, then I'm 80%, 85% sure you're ovulating every month. So you can just carry on. If you're not, if you've got a very long cycle or you've got very short cycles, then absolutely working out when you're ovulating may be very useful. But if you're only ovulating every 3 months, knowing that is great, but it means you've dropped your chances to 33% versus having 3 goes in 3 months, you only have 1 shot. So it's much worse. So in those cases, what you need to be doing is getting ovulation regularly. So why might your cycle be out of whack? Well, if you're like about 20 people I've spoken to in the last few weeks, it might be related to a COVID vaccine. I don't know. It's all anecdotal. But I've spoken to enough women now who seem to have had some temporary cycle irregularity following vaccination. But it settles. The most common reasons for cycle irregularity where it was previously normal are things like stress, weight loss, and weight gain. So again, optimizing that and looking at your work-life balance and trying to find something you enjoy, trying to get out of your own way is very, very useful. You might have a condition like polycystic ovarian syndrome. 40% of all women can be said to have some degree of PCOS, and that can cause your cycles to be off. Get tested, get checked, see if this is a feature. If your cycle is very long, there are medications that can be given to get your cycle moving regularly, and that can be a very low-fi, very easy way to get you ovulating regularly to give you a good shot at spontaneous conception. So they're the kind of things you should be doing. You should be getting your BMI on track, you should be getting plenty of exercise because that's probably pound for pound the best stress reliever in the world, and you should be getting on folic acid. And you should be fixing poor life habits, and I think we all know what they are at this point.
So just to clarify, all of this advice that you would give to anyone who's thinking of trying to conceive, you'd be giving that same advice to those who maybe are thinking about becoming parents by themselves.
Oh, yeah.
So single people who wish to become pregnant through
100.
Because obviously if you say to me, have regular unprotected sex, I have all the sex in the world, I'm not going to get pregnant because I'm married to a woman. So obviously there's a caveat that applies to only.
Of course, I'm speaking particularly about heterosexual couples there. I mean, I don't think I've said anything there that should surprise anybody.
No.
This isn't pregnancy-specific advice. Hey guys, if you're overweight, lose weight. This is me saying this. If you're smoking, stop. If you're binge drinking, reduce. This is really solid, sensible advice. It just kind of goes double for fertility and for reproduction. An enormous quantity of the people I see, be they heterosexual or homosexual, be they in female-only relationships or male-female relationships, they are very used to their lives living on a curve where the reward is commensurate with the effort. So they've worked for something in their life, and they've got what they want out of it, or if they haven't, they can look back and go, do you know what, I could have tried harder, maybe I just didn't want it badly enough or something like that. Having children and getting pregnant flips that all on its head. You don't have the same degree of control. And I think there's huge industries that have been built up around giving people the illusion of control around this. And it's not nice, but you have to be honest. You have to look at the stats. You've got to look at the science. You've got to look at the evidence and go, is this of practical value or not? And while it might make you feel like you're in control, a bit more of the outcome, you're actually not. It's still a bit of a lucky dip. There's still a huge amount of things beyond your control. And I do think you have to acknowledge the secondary cost of the OPKs, of the LH kits, of the supplements and all the rest, and how much extra strain that puts on an already strained situation. So yeah, make smart choices, guys. Be sensible. Really simple kind of low range advice.
So if we're going back to a heterosexual couple who've been trying, whatever that means, for a certain period of time, at what point would you, and that's like, how long's a piece of string?
I knew I was going to talk about this. I was thinking about this earlier today because subfertility is defined, or infertility is defined as trying for a year if you're under 35, or 6 months if you're over 35, and that's been drilled into everybody's starting the profession. I think that's wrong. I mean, I just think it's wrong. I think getting tested doesn't mean having treatment. Getting tested doesn't mean that there's something wrong. Getting tested, getting informed doesn't mean giving up control. It's quite the opposite. So I think more and more modern healthcare is moving towards prevention rather than cure. We're talking about screening for breast cancer, screening for cervical cancer, getting ahead of healthcare, having health checkups and checking our cholesterol when we hit our 40s, checking our prostate-specific antigens and things like that, screening people, trying to get ahead of healthcare issues. We're still a little bit behind the curve in fertility on that. We're still talking in terms of, well, you're going to have to earn your fertility test. You're going to have to earn a conversation with that. I mean, you haven't spent enough time out in the wilderness. And that's mad. That's mad altogether. So when should you get checked? And I'm talking about, as Claire said, a semen analysis on a man. I'm talking about a blood test on a woman, just a simple AMH, anti-Müllerian hormone, looking at the ovarian reserve, how many apples in your mouth. Whenever you want, do it before you're trying to conceive. Be fertility aware. Get ahead of it. Know your options. Be proactive. Get the information. And then, touch wood, there won't be a problem. But if there is, you're much more likely to have realistic options. And that's regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation or anything like that. This is just good advice for everybody. You start getting cervical smears when you're 25 years old. Hell, it should probably be earlier. Ideally, you should start getting smears when you become sexually active and you're potentially being exposed to HPV. So why isn't fertility going hand in hand with that? Why aren't we thinking about that? And sure, if it's normal, off you go. I don't want to talk to you for 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. Great, fantastic. But at least At least it's something that could be ticking over in the back of your mind.
Well, it seems just really awful to think of people who are trying for a period of time, and when they actually get tested, you say to them, well, it was really never going to work.
Well, absolutely. And I'm biased. We're biased. We work in this field. All we see day in, day out is people struggling to conceive, or people dealing with, obviously, if you spend long enough fertility, you see couples coming back because they've had negative cycles. So you see a lot of people who've had negative cycles because, oddly enough, people don't keep banging on my door when they have completed their family. It's very rude. So you become biased. But the common thread that, again, went through all these stories is, I wish I'd known then what I know now. My children are going to be better educated than I was. They're going to be fertility aware. There's an opportunity for us to learn, to have people learn that lesson without having to go through fertility treatment or negative cycles. It's a great opportunity. So yeah, I mean, in terms of, like, if you're thinking about having children, if you're thinking that having children is something that might be important to you in the future, then I think getting checked, doing a semen analysis, doing a simple blood test, I think is absolutely de rigueur. I think you really should be. And then, I mean, that goes into fertility preservation, sperm freezing and egg freezing, which something else I won't get into tonight, but it's something else that's very, very close to my heart.
Okay, great. I think we might start answering some questions and get through them. So, okay. I'll ask, you answer.
Okay.
My husband has good 6% DNA frag result. However, the sperm volume is only 0.5 mil. Could this be low volume? Could this low volume be the reason we've not had a natural conception? Been trying to conceive for 3 years.
Quick sticker. I know what I'm going to say, but I want to see if you get it right.
I wouldn't say low volume would be causative. The only causative factor for you not conceiving. It wouldn't be like the most important parameter. Obviously, it is important to a certain extent, but it really depends on the other parameters as well. If you have 100 million sperm per mil, half a mil is still fine, you know. So I'd like to hear your point of view.
She's right, and she's absolutely technically correct, and that's what the evidence suggests. Anecdotally, you would wonder about a low volume. Are there sexual positions which are more associated with higher conception rates? Maybe. Remember one of the lines from Rossa Carroll Kelly, one of the books, was that Ross thinking that you couldn't get pregnant with sex standing up. That's not true, you know. So maybe there's, and then you're starting to think, right, what's happening? Where, like, the vast amount of, when you have intercourse, when you have heterosexual intercourse, the vast amount of the ejaculate is not going nowhere near the cervix, and it's a very, very tiny volume that actually gets into the cervix. Cervix can be quite hostile, so a lot of sperm are getting knocked out at that stage. So it's a very minimal volume that's getting up through that into the uterus and out of the tubes. But there's still millions of sperm in there. So you actually build up, as I said, you're building up those reservoirs. On balance, I think probably not, more than probably yes. But it is something that I would consider at the back of my mind, that you're thinking, oh, geez, I wonder if we prep that sample and put it in the top of the uterus, would we get it? But that's very anecdotal. I don't have a lot of science behind that. I'd love to know the rest of the sperm parameters, but, you know, because all we have there is an excellent DNA fragmentation result, but I don't know the count or the motility or the morphology.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone else has asked, I'm 46 years old and I want to get pregnant and use my own eggs. I've never done IVF. I haven't frozen my eggs. I didn't know much about this 10 years ago until now. I know it's my last chance of getting pregnant. What's the best fertility clinic that can help me? Well, asking us, you know,
Unbiased.
I want to use my own eggs first and see how they are. I'm really healthy. So is there a cutoff point here for using your own eggs?
No, there isn't. And I really do try to avoid being paternalistic. But one of the biggest factors when it comes to success or failure of fertility treatment is maternal age. You can't get away from that. The oldest ever recorded success with own egg IVF anywhere on this planet was 47 years old. And believe you me, that got written up and got thrown out everywhere, you know, because it was so exceptionally unusual. You can dress it up however you want, and I do not like being the bearer of bad news, but the percentage chance of success at 46 years old really are very, very low. Nobody ever likes to say never or always. We can't, because there are spontaneous conceptions happening out there. But IVF is fraught. IVF is very, very difficult. It's financially difficult, emotionally difficult, physically difficult. There's lots of costs to this. So we want to make sure that the juice is worth the squeeze, that what we're giving you is an honest shot at success. Realistically, your chance of having a baby from IVF is less than 1%. Now, there's various tests you can do, and you can look and see are there eggs there and things like that. And I have done IVF cycles on people in these age brackets before. But what's vital for me is that I make sure they have an understanding of what the challenges are and the limitations are. This person that's especially gone out of their way to say more than once they're very interested in pursuing their own eggs. Obviously, what we tend to talk about in this kind of space is egg donation, which can have a much higher success rate and might be a better option. Some people can only even countenance or consider looking at that when they feel like they've exhausted everything. So it's not a case of there's absolutely no value to doing a cycle. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to kind of get the ball rolling and do an AMH and have come in and have a conversation with us. Where should you go for own egg IVF? Regardless of your, well, you should come to us, obviously. But what am I going to say? You know, but what you will get is a very, very honest, candid discussion of the challenges, the pros, the cons, and some advice. And once you're armed with all that information, then ultimately whatever this person decides to do is the right thing to do.
Okay, someone else just said, I've just turned 38. I lost an ovary before I turned 19 due to a cyst. I've been on the pill ever since. I'm currently single but want to have kids in the future. Considering freezing my eggs, where do I start?
Well, come and talk to us. The good news is you're still
38.
You're still young. Ideally, we like people to think the optimal age to freeze eggs is under 35. But once we're done with that, younger is better than older. So coming in, getting checked. You're down to one ovary. Okay, so, but hopefully that will still have eggs. If you're not planning to have children for a while, then I think taking a bit of control and ownership over this situation, you're singing to the choir here. Come and have a chat with us. This is a bit of a plug now. You won't get charged for having a conversation with a fertility nurse specialist here. So come in, talk to them. They are very knowledgeable about all of this. They will give you a really, really good steer. You'll get a feel for the building, you get a feel for it, you get loads of access to resources and information, and then you'll be able to better informed to make a choice. Without knowing too much else about you, should you freeze your eggs? Yeah, absolutely you should.
And I will just say that the nurses are also some of the loveliest people.
Yes.
Aren't they?
Yes,
They're
they
very,
are
very nice.
absolutely wonderful.
Okay. Have been trying for a second child for 8 years and have tried all the supplements as I struggle to ovulate each month. 29-day cycle. My husband has had several semen analysis, 5% motility. So we both have issues. Due to our age, which is 40, we would like a quick fix. Have been on supplements, injections, Clomid, but was a very stressful time. We spent a lot of money and no results. If we wanted to go straight to ICSI, how quick would the process be? We're not sure to give up or keep trying. They have an almost 10-year-old girl, all natural, no problems, getting pregnant.
Not hard
So
to
it's,
Okay. Both therapists have straight away are thinking all the Clomid, the letrozole, the HCG in the world isn't going to make a lick of difference if the motility is 5%. It's not impossible to get a spontaneous conception with this result. It really isn't. We've both seen, right?
Yeah.
Spontaneous conception with really terrible, what we would consider awful semen analysis. So it can happen. It's just statistically very unlikely. It's a lot of win as opposed to, hey, you know what, 17-20%. So just in direct contravention of everything I said earlier, yeah, ICSI is a great solution here. So you should look into that. You've put such an amount of emotional and psychological effort into something which unfortunately I think has a very low chance of yielding you a positive result. What you need to do is take those resources and put them something which potentially will be an awful lot higher. The reality is you need ICSI, and more or less, and being a little bit overly simplistic here, once we do ICSI, we're taking those sperm issues off the table. Okay, not completely, but you know, but we're taking them really out of pain a lot, which swings the lens back over onto you and what the AMH is, and how old are you, and the ovarians are enrolled. What's the fastest? You come in, you contact the clinic tomorrow, you book in, we see you in the next few days. We get some testing done. You see me in a couple of weeks. You could theoretically be in cycle before Christmas. You know, now that would be quick, okay, because it's now the end of September, but it's very doable. But what I want you to have, again, I'm not trying to push under pressure, but I want you to have options. I want you to get the information, make an informed choice yourself.
Thanks. Okay, this is a question we get asked a lot, which is, do you have a cutoff limit for BMIs? Do you decline patients based on high BMI?
What do you think, Renee? You've been with me so many times. I've answered this question now.
I can absolutely answer this question. The answer is no. There is no cutoff point. You will not be turned away. BMI is one factor among many, which can potentially affect your fertility, can affect your overall health, can affect a potential fertility cycle, a pregnancy. So yes, it is a factor, but at the same time, you will be treated like a human being. You will come in, you will have a conversation, and the options will be presented to you. You will be told very honestly what potential risks are, what your chances of success are, and at the end of the day, it's, you know, you're an adult having a treatment.
There we are. Couldn't have said that myself.
Consent.
It's a factor and something we need to take seriously. We need to make sure you're very aware of risks. Sometimes if a BMI is very high, it can make access to the ovaries difficult. It can make sedation difficult or exercise. We are not in the business of putting people's health at risk or at compromise. So is there an obstacle? No, there isn't. There's a conversation to be had. Is your weight trending in the direction? What are you doing and all this? But we'll try to do it in an empathetic and compassionate way. As Renee said, I think it's not our job to tell you what to do and what to want. It's our job to inform you and make sure you're appraised of both facts and then make an informed choice yourself. Yeah. So come and have a chat.
Okay. If you have a very low AMH and are over 40, can IVF help? And are there options other than donor eggs?
I mean, yeah, sometimes depending on circumstance. I think you need to be careful about AMH. AMH is a bit of an unreliable witness. It can be very useful. The AMH tells me two things. It tells me how proactive you should be about your fertility options, and it tells me how you might respond in terms of medications and dosages and protocols and things like that. It doesn't tell me how good or bad your eggs are. It doesn't tell me how likely you are to conceive spontaneously. And it doesn't always even get the ovarian reserve piece of the puzzle right. It's just the simplest entry-level way we have. A secondary test, an antral follicle count of your ovaries, may be different than your AMH. And we're just talking to one nurse today with a patient who had a disparity between her AMH and her antral follicle count, one was lower, one was higher. And really, ultimately, we don't know how you're going to respond until we give you stimulation medications. So there may be challenges here. I don't want to sugarcoat things. There may absolutely be challenges, but I think having a conversation in the first instance is a good idea.
Okay. Someone asking, they're based in Donegal, curious if you do satellite clinics, any stage of the process, or it's everything based in Dublin.
Could be murdered. We are planning on rolling.
He announces like 20 new clinics.
Yeah. We are planning satellites in the very near future now. I don't think Antonio is out of class right now. I don't think we'll have one in Donegal, so I do think there's still going to be a degree of travel. What we're trying to do here, though, is we're trying to streamline and simplify the process a little bit. So we have availability with online consults. I like online consults, but I love the clinic. Guys, honest to God, it looks just brilliant. Yeah. It just looks brilliant. But so you can have online consults. We can try to get you down for as much as can possibly be done in one day. There's clever ways to kind of get you both down if you're in a duo, in a relationship, get you both down, get as much information and testing done all in one fell swoop. You'll get your results sent to your own online portal, your own online records immediately afterwards. And then we can kind of plan a lot of things remotely. So really minimize the amount of travel and disruption to your life that can come as a result of fertility treatment. So please don't let the fact that you're geographically a little bit more distant put you off, that there are clever ways of doing this.
Also to mention that if this person has already had previous testing.
Oh, gotcha. Just send us the results and we will, yeah, that's absolutely
so that might save some time as well. How important is the trigger when it comes to IVF?
It's vital. It's probably the most important injection. It changed everything. So what is the trigger injection? Sorry, I feel like I'm chime in anytime you want. The trigger is the final injection we give, which matures and releases the eggs from the ovary. Now, we think when we give a trigger, you're going to ovulate about 38 hours later. So we try to do the egg collection 36 and a half hours after the trigger. So before you ovulate, but after the eggs have been matured and released into the follicles, because they grow on the side of the follicle. Before trigger injection, when IVF first started, Louise Brown, and going back to all that time, they didn't have triggers. So they had to keep doing blood tests every hour, looking for that LH surge, and then go, oh my God, the LH surge. And if it was 2 a.m, then you have to go and do the egg collection at 2 a.m. I can tell you, if that was still the case, IVF would not be a popular choice for a lot of clinicians. But trigger injections have changed everything. So there's loads of different types of trigger injections as well. Over the last number of years, we've got really safe in IVF, and if you're overstimulated, we can give a different kind of trigger, which matures the eggs but prevents ovarian hyperstimulation. So it's vital. So when we're doing the cycle, we the various calendar setups and things like that. So you can look at a calendar and see, I'm supposed to take this medication, it's up to you to kind of keep track of that. But for the trigger, we send specific SMS messages to your phone if you're set up for it and you let us an hour before and 15 minutes before, because these injections are vital. If you come into me and you go, I'm really sorry, I took my trigger 2 hours later than you told me to, you'd better really hope that I'm not doing something else 2 hours later than your planned egg collection time, because that's when your egg collection has to happen. So it's something we drill and drill and drill, that it has to be done at the right way in the right time. Yeah. Good question. I haven't asked that before.
We only have a couple of minutes left, so we'll try and fly through a few of these. A couple of people have asked, what is regular sex, or how often should couples be having sex?
2 to 3 days, or 4 days every 4 days, right?
Yeah. Okay. Low AMH at 35, reduced in the last year, how often should I get it checked, and how much does it vary?
It can vary quite a bit from month to month. Also, there's quite a big range on the test. So somebody could have an AMH of 5 one month and 7 the next month and go, oh, it's gone up. It's not, it's the same value. There's a plus or minus at least 20% swing on these results without actually meaning anything, especially if the AMH gets a little bit lower. Check it every 6 months at least. But if you're 35 and you've got a low AMH, you need to start thinking about your options way more than just checking your AMH again. You need to get an anthropologist again, have a conversation with me or a fertility specialist.
Okay. Is there a greater chance of miscarriage with fertility treatments such as IVF?
Maybe ever so slightly, but it's a very marginal difference, and it's probably not due to the IVF, but the need first. But maybe the fact that you need IVF is there an underlying egg or sperm issue, which could be a contributing factor. We don't think it's the IVF and stimulation stuff that's causing the miscarriage risk.
Okay, how does your thyroid affect your fertility?
Loads of different ways. If it's out of whack, it can affect your cycle, it can affect your ovulation. If it's very low or very high, it can cause thyrotoxicosis, or hypothyroidism can be associated with miscarriage. So it's one of the baseline tests that we do is looking at your thyroid, and it's something we want to be stable before you go through treatment.
Okay, someone else is asking if we know the semen analysis is bad, had previous tests, we need to repeat them all again. No, you don't necessarily have to, we've already said. If the pregnancy is successful, do we stay with the clinic for the duration of the pregnancy, or do you go back to your own doctor because they're a couple of hours away?
Yeah, so for pregnancy, we'll do a scan here in early pregnancy, and then we'll pass you on to your primary care physician or the maternity hospital of your choice. We can give you some direction on that, and we can write a referral letter. We don't need to see after that because we do want to hear how things go. Semen analysis every year? Yeah, every year. If it's but it can be done locally. We'll accept results locally. I will say though, Claire won't say it because she's nice. The semen analysis that are coming out of our lab here are second to none. They are not generally. I'm so proud to have this team. So you'll get a really accurate semen analysis here if yours is agitation.
Okay, perfect. A question for you: does the amount of semen produced have an effect on male fertility?
This is again the whole volume issue. Really not the most important parameter. I really wouldn't get hung up about it. Obviously, if the production is really tiny, you might want to look into see maybe it's retrograde ejaculation, or maybe there's some anatomical problem or something like that. But it isn't the most important parameter. You really have to know the full story and the full medical history before you can sort of make a conclusive comment about that.
Okay, perfect. I'm 32 years old, have PCOS and hypothyroidism. I don't seem to ovulate when I take ovulation tests. What would be my options? Is there anything else apart from IVF?
Yeah, I mean, there's timed intercourse cycles, ovulation induction, follicle tracking cycles with medications and trigger induction. It's not something we do here because I really want our focus to be on IVF and IUI and reciprocal IVF and egg freezing. I want to keep want to be brilliant at what we do. I've spoken about this before, but there's lots of GPs who've been interested in this who will be able to give you a really good steer on it. And if they can get you ovulating regularly, then you've every shot. If it doesn't work in 3 or 6 cycles, that come talk to me and we'll go with something a bit more aggressive, which has a really, really strong chance of success.
Okay, perfect. A couple of people have asked if we're going to make the recording available, and we do hope to do so. I think we're going to leave it there. There were a couple of questions we didn't get to.
But we'll Instagram them.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not following us on Instagram, we're at Therapie Fertility, little plug there. Please go and follow us now. But we put a question box every Wednesday, and then we make that Q&A available in the days following. So thank you so much to John.
Thank you,
and to Claire, and to everyone who has joined us tonight for Fertility 101. Really hope you have found it helpful. And please, if you have any questions at all or would like to book in for a free fertility nurse consultation, please just visit our website. Thanks and have a great night.